Hey all, my name is Hank Portney. I am a product manager at Paperless Parts. If you haven't had a chance to meet or work with me before, that means that my job is to work with folks like you to make our platform better and make your experience estimating more efficient, among many other things. I am so excited today to announce and present to you about custom markups and margins, a brand new feature that allows you far more flexibility in pricing within Paperless Parts. In this session, I'll give you some background about pricing before and up to today, introduce Custom Markups Margins, our new feature, give you a demo including 8 examples, talk about how you can get access to and get configured with this feature, and entertain questions in the Q&A. If you have questions throughout my presentation, feel free to leave them in the Q&A feature while I am talking, and I'll come back to them at the end. To begin, I want to take us a little bit back in time. If you've been with Paperless Parts for a while, you might remember this screen. This is what our quote item kind of used to look like towards the bottom of it. And what you're seeing here is that Paperless Parts back in the 2020s and 2021 used to have only one markup for the entire quote item, right? No programmatic calculation of markup, just one markup that you could apply in percent and dollars to your quote. This, of course, if you have an ERP system, is maybe even less than your ERP could do. So, of course, we improved this over time and made pricing as it is today, which is where you can apply dynamic markups and margins to 5 discrete categories of cost: material pricing, inside pricing, outside pricing, purchase components, and your total cost. All of these different cost categories you can apply pricing to. And you can use P3L, our configuration system, to dynamically calculate those prices based on table data and information in your account. But there were certain limits as well. You also couldn't reference necessarily part or workpiece information. This, of course, is a strong upgrade that gives you a dynamic pricing across these categories. But we're really, really excited to announce that we're doing even more than this with custom markups and margins. With custom markups and margins, you can now apply pricing, markup, or margin to any custom aggregation of cost across your part or even across an entire assembly. When you use these, they'll be just like regular pricing items. They can be added by your templates. They have dynamically calculated percentages and can have variables, allowing you to get the rich pricing experience you do today. But they apply to dynamic cost categories that you can work with our team to define. And so when you add them, you'll also see a custom cost category show up in the costing table. In this example on the right side of the screen, you're seeing a piece price versus tooling markup. We'll look at this example a little bit later, where I am now marking up discrete other categories of cost beyond those 5. This unlocks, as you might imagine, a brand new world of flexibility in pricing that can match your shop's existing strategies or allow you to adopt even more dynamic strategies for the current market or for any market. These custom markups information are not only available in your quote to help you cost and price, but also the data that comes from these prices being in your quotes and components on your line items rather, are also available in our default quote export, our analytics, and our open API, meaning this data becomes available for your larger ecosystem of work with Paperless Parts. I'm going to give you a demo of a bunch of examples of this in a moment, but to help you understand just how powerful and flexible this is, I want to take you through how this works very briefly. If you're not a user of P3L, don't be scared by this next slide. Don't worry about trying to understand all that code on the right side of the screen. But I just wanted to show you this big blob over here to help you understand exactly how this works and why this is so powerful. The pricing P3L that we use to calculate your markups and margins within pricing items can now access a whole host of new information about your parts, components, and router information, especially with assemblies. On the right side of the screen, you're seeing that the system is now able to read from your part data, custom attributes, materials, operations, and operation variables, both to calculate the cost category information, summing up the cost for your custom aggregation, as well as for applying markup, which means that this is not only unlocking the custom markups use case of a custom cost category, but also unlocks a new host of dynamic pricing options. We'll take a look at some examples to actually understand that in practice. Here I am in a quote. And you can see here that I have 5 copies of the same part. And just to break down this particular part, we have a sheet metal assembly with 2 manufactured components, several purchased components beneath those, and 1 manufactured tool. This assembly is just representative, but of course this feature would work with anything that you might be costing and pricing, including non-assemblies that we'll show a little bit later. In this first example, we have applied a brand new markup to a specific subsection of material cost, specifically difficult materials. In this quote, material cost for our 1 component represents $674, but difficult materials accounts for only $539.36 according to this readout. To understand what we mean, let's take a look at this top component here, which we can see is made out of a simple aluminum 6061T6, relatively easy material to work with in this particular case. But our base component, for whatever reason, is being asked to be made out of titanium, a relatively difficult material for this particular case. Because it's difficult for us to work with, we probably want to apply more markup to that because it's harder for us to do. We want to win more profit as a result. So we've been able to do that with custom markups, where we've added the difficult material markup, which has added the corresponding cost category for difficult materials, representing the cost of that difficult material, titanium, and applying a unique percentage to that increment. This means for the first time, we're now able to differentiate the cost amounts that these markups apply to. And this is just one example where I've grouped on specific difficult materials. But you might imagine you could group on any combination of materials that might be interesting, or groups of materials or single materials, and even more. In this next example, we've done the same kind of thing, but for a work center or group of work centers. Specifically, we've applied a different kind of markup to the cost of just our laser work center, where inside processing accounts for about $1,000 on this particular part. Lasers only account for $178 of this particular part, and we found that group of cost and applied a 10% markup to it, equivalent to 17.81. Of course, this 10% is just the percent that I chose for our formula, but this could be dynamically calculated as well based on any of the other factors in your component. Once again, very quickly, we were able to go from a prior quote, which was able to mark up only the entire labor, to marking up a very specific aggregation of cost within that quote. And again, this is just a taste of the flexibility that's possible here. I elected to look for laser work centers, but maybe you want to look for more specific aggregations of cost within those work centers, perhaps looking at the runtime that the part is on, or the overhead, the setup cost, the maintenance of the machines involved in the laser work center. All of that would be possible with the flexibility of custom markups and margins. In this next example, we've done that very separation I was talking about, specifically separating out our labor from our overhead for this component. Our labor is looking at the costs of operations across the parts in this assembly that are associated with actual operating, versus overhead is looking at the costs associated with upkeep, setup, and whatnot. And this is how I've chosen to break out inside labor and overhead. But of course, if you have slightly different definitions of that, or the way that your shop chooses to operate, you could match that as well. And so again, we're able to find groups of costs that are equaling sub-costs of the other categories or different aggregations that are present here. We're able to mark those up as well. And again, flexibility is the name of the game. If you want to make this work differently, you totally can. In this next set of examples, we'll look at the differentiation of piece price and tooling that I teased out earlier. If you recall, I mentioned that there is a manufactured tool on this particular component, which is worth about $90 in cost. Looking at the markups on this particular item, we can see that we have a cost breakout of $1,600 for the cost without the cost of the tool, and $90 for the cost of the tool found automatically across the assembly. If we had multiple tools across this assembly, we could also track those and separate them out this way as well. In this case, I've just got the one. This means for the first time, as opposed to marking up the general cost of the part, the total cost, we can actually mark up the specific cost, which doesn't include the tool, helping us actually mark up in the way that makes sense to best win the work. And again, if you wanted to break out this piece price into different increments, you were totally free to do so with the configuration of this system. Maybe you wanted to see the piece price broken down into the piece prices material, inside, outside, and purchase component costs. You certainly could do that with this system. In this last example of custom markups, we'll look at a special variant that I made just recently. And this is marking up outside finishes. This is a very specific combination of router information that we found and marked up, equivalent to $300 here. To tell what we're talking about, let's look at the routers of these individual components. We then found in this first component that we've got powder coat, which is going to be a finish done by an outside service that is about $300. Where separately on this base component, we have a finish that is not an outside service worth $200. Thanks to the way that the system is configured by me with this markup, we are aggregating just the cost of outside finishes and marking that up as well with our standard 10% markup. And of course, I could dynamically calculate that as well. Across these 7 examples, I hope you've seen just how powerful and flexible these custom markups can be. Instead of just marking up your standard cost categories, you can work with our team to configure and design custom cost categories that you can then mark up dynamically. But I mentioned that there's also extra dynamic pricing that's now possible thanks to some of the P3L access that we gave. And so I do want to tease out one final special use case that is now possible with the surrounding features with this release. This particular part is a machined part. And of course, with machining, producing the cost for that can be a relatively complicated affair. Predicting the time that it would take between setup and run can be complicated. Especially if you're working fast and outputting a lot of volume of quotes, it may just feel unwieldy to try to do that at all. One way that some shops have gotten their way around that is to understand CNC parts through their complexity. Just broadly categorizing them by complexity and trusting they can win the work if they cost parts relatively within those bands, as long as they can successfully predict what those bands are. Of course, today in Paperless Parts, you can have the system try to produce or estimate that complexity with some kind of complexity operation that could look at the parts information and calculate that. In this example, I have one here that is determined this is a level 3 complexity part. We could associate costs with that or modify the costs of our different operations with that as well if we wanted. But for the longest time, you were not able to actually necessarily price off of that complexity without kind of scrolling down and inputting that complexity manually into your pricing. For the first time, with the functionality available with this feature, you can now have your pricing markup respond automatically to that complexity from your operation. As I mentioned to you before, we can read from your bill of materials in the markup calculation, which means we've read in that it's a level 3 part and applied that markup automatically. This means if I go up here to our complexity and I decide to override that complexity to, let's say, a level 2, you'll see that this will in fact change my level 3 markup to a level 2 markup, which has 20% instead of 30% markup, according to my rules about markup based on complexity. Again, this is really just opening the floodgates for all manner of ways for you to mark up your parts more dynamically based on custom cost categories or just based on the information available in your router. We are so excited to see all the different ways that you might use this to make your work more efficient, to make your parts more competitive, and to help you win more work. If this was exciting to you, if you're interested in this functionality in your account, because it requires configuration that is relatively complex, you'll need to reach out our team to get configured. Specifically, you can reach out to support@paperlessparts.com, request information about custom markups, request access or help with configuration for custom markups. Our team may need to talk to you depending on your situation, and certainly we'll need to understand exactly what you're looking for. So to make this a little faster or easier for you, I highly recommend thinking about the kinds of use cases you'd be interested in and detailing them in your email request to our support team. Think about it like this: I'm interested in marking up this category of costs, or I'm interested in having my this markup responds to this particular cost to change my markup percentage. The more information you can give us up front, the faster we can get you configured. And of course, you're welcome to get on a call with our team and talk it out as well. Are there any questions? Heading over to the Q&A section first. Deepal asked, how are you tagging that special material or laser work center? What I have chosen to do in this particular case is just hard code in those values, but I could accomplish it in any number of ways, including maintaining a sheet in my custom tables that track which materials or work centers I wanted to be of that category and having them mark up that way. The flexibility is all possible thanks to it being in P3L there. Good question. Deepal also asked, different MU for labor versus overhead is exactly what we need to been asking for. I'm so glad to hear that. Really excited for you to get access to this and try it out. Walter asked, are you able to build out custom configurations by a customer? That is a decent question. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish there. If you're looking to mark up a certain customer's parts differently, the answer is yes. You can read from the account contact information associated with the quote in your markup and kind of change out the markup percentage. And fun fact, that was actually already possible before today. So you're welcome to kind of get started on that right away with whoever you're working with. They may have some questions or contradictions to that, depending on what you need. Could be wrong about the specifics there. Fernando asked, is it possible to mark up operations tied to specific customers? Same kind of question there. If you have operations that are specific to customers, the short answer should be yes, right? We can crawl the list of operations, identify those that might be tied to specific customers, and then mark up something accordingly. Of course, knowing the details of that would kind of help me answer specifically, but from what you're saying, I think the answer is certainly yes. Deepal also asked, if we're somewhat familiar with P3L, do we still need a support ticket? The short answer is for the next couple of days, yes. You'll just need to get us to turn the feature on, but you might be able to do the configuration as well. For you in particular, I can certainly let the people know that work with you that we can get that turned on for you and get you started. Great question. Heading over to chat to check on anything else. Would these custom markups be reflected in Excel downloads? The answer to that is yes. Yes, they are available in Excel downloads. In fact, let me just briefly share my screen again and show you that. Here we can see we've got one of our quote summary Excel files. And we can see that in this Excel file, we have not only our standard categories of information, but we also have the kind of custom categories of information as well. Difficult material cost and markup, inside labor, cost and markup, overhead cost and markup. This could become uniquely an interesting kind of reporting tool about your quote as well. Great question. Heading back over to Zoom. Yeah, Deepal, got you. Will do. Another question we had was, can we mark up export controlled items? Michael, that is a good question. I think that is the sole exception at the moment. That is certainly something we might be able to change going forward. We're definitely thinking about it, not a necessarily new request. At this very moment, not yet. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out and let us know strongly. Heading back over to our QA, I think we're good there. Cindy asked, how do you export that data to Excel? Take your tour of that briefly. In our quotes, we can go to the Actions menu and choose the Excel download, which generates that very spreadsheet that I showed you there with the kind of summary information. Great question. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments from the group?
Hank, I see a hand raised in the audience from Andrew. I'm going to allow him to unmute and speak.
Thanks, Holly. Hey, Andrew, did you have a question there? Currently muted. Not necessarily hearing you, but if you've got a question, feel free to leave it in our Q&A. If there are no other questions that I am seeing, I'm going to go ahead and close this out here with a thank you for attending today. For some final bits of information here, remember, if you're interested in this feature and interested in getting in your account, reach out to our support team and let us know, especially with some requests around what specifically you're interested in getting configured. As an extra plug, Power 2025 Paperless Parts User Conference is happening again this year from April 30th to May 1st in Boston. This includes hands-on workshops, expert panels, and feedback sessions. and is a great place to connect with fellow users of Paperless Parts and fellow folks in your industry who might be like-minded about solving problems that your shop is dealing with. We are more than excited to have even more people in attendance than we've ever had before this year. And if you're interested in that, please feel free to register at power.paperlessparts.com. Thank you all for attending. And as a final note, if you are interested in sharing this recording with anybody else, please feel free to find it in your email after this event, as well as find it available on our website, as with all Power Lunches. We took a recording of this, and so it will be available to anybody else who wants to see or that you want to show in your shop. I'm going to check one more time on Q&A to see if there's any final questions there. I'm seeing one more. Michael asked, is it managed through a GUI interface or by updating custom tables? Can you show us the admin side of things? Sure. Here at the end, for anybody that's a little scared of the P3L stuff, don't worry about trying to understand what you're going to see here, but I'll absolutely give you a tour through the kind of admin side of things briefly. Heading over to our quote here, I'm going to head over to the Configure tab. In the Configure tab, we have pricing like normal. Custom markups live in here like other pricing items. So you can see alongside my standard category markups, I have all these kind of custom markups that I built. Let's take a look at a pretty simple example to start. For our difficult material markup, we created this by adding a new pricing item and choosing the new cost category option, where we were able to choose a category. If I wanted to make difficult material again, I would just do that here and choose a color for it. This functionality may not be available to you until you reach out to us and start talking with us. Once you have created that item, you'll be able to now access this information from the configured item, as well as inside of the markup calculation, access this new side of P3L. This function, get components, is the new function that allows you to iterate through the assembly to build materials. So you can see here for a moment that I was able to find a titanium in the material of a particular part, and then add that material operations worth of cost to the total cost, with which I output into my percentage. If this is looking a little complicated for you, this is why we have our team available to configure this for you. But if you're familiar with P3L, you're certainly welcome to kind of do this once you've gotten the feature enabled for your account. This is kind of a simple example here, right, where I just look for one particular material. Of course, you could get custom table information in here and use that far more interestingly and programmatically to read from a table. You'd have to get it set up to do that, but once you got it set up, you'll be able to kind of go in and use one of your tables in your account to drive that. Perhaps I just had a table full of materials and had that kind of referenced in here. I hope that's just a little bit of a teaser that isn't too far in the details. Fantastic. If there are no other questions, thank you for attending today. Please reach out if you're interested in the feature, and I hope you have a great rest of your day there. Thanks so much.